2 stories in this podcast. I hope you guys enjoy it. Let's get rolling with it. All right, here we go. I got up this morning and took a shower. I took a long shower. I did something that I do about every other shower. I usually wash off with a rag and scrub all the dirt and everything that I get on me from working in the yard and things I do after work. I just took a raw bar of soap. It's the Dixiecryptid soap. And I just soaked down with it just to get that smell on me. And it stayed on me all day. I absolutely love this Yeti bar soap. If you guys have not checked out Yeti bar soap, you need to. Go to yetibars.net or Yeti Bars on Facebook. When you make your order at checkout, enter the code DC10 for an additional 10% discount. You're going to love this stuff, I promise. Go check yetibars.net. Here's an email from someone I think wants to be anonymous. I'm not sure, but I'm not going to say his name just to be safe. Here's what he writes. It's been 5 years since this happened. Although I didn't actually see anything, I can't just explain away what happened either. I guess that's why it stays with me to this day. I bought a fifth wheel located in Henderson, Texas. It was parked in an RV camp just outside of town. The park was surrounded by a large, fairly dense forest, and there were about 15 other RVs parked there as well, with the woods behind us. I had never stayed in an RV before. I bought it to get out of the city and rest. I'm a retired nurse. I was glad to get out of the city and travel for a while. I had my dog with me, my buddy and traveling companion of 13 years, Roscoe. Roscoe and I enjoyed going for long walks. Sometimes we'd venture into the forest behind the fifth wheel. It was quiet back there and peaceful. It had a calming effect on me. At times, though, it could be a little spooky. It was almost like I could feel eyes watching me. There was one event during my stay in that area that I will never forget. Roscoe and I were off on one of our walks. We decided to take the trail leading into the forest. We took our usual walk around and then started back up the trail. Suddenly, Roscoe whined softly. He stood alert, sniffing something beyond my senses. The hair stood up on his back as he stared deeper into the forest. I couldn't tell what he was seeing or smelling or sensing. Not knowing what he knew only served to make me even more nervous. Then his tail went down, the hair on his back stood more rigid, and his neck fluffed up. He had a look that I've only seen when he doesn't like whatever he's seeing. It was a warning look of danger. I softly said his name, and in response he whined again and looked straight forward as if to say, "Mom, there's something out there." Roscoe will chase cats, and he's been known to be slightly protective of me around strangers, but this was more than usual. It was something different. He was truly spooked, and he stood there for a few more minutes, but I couldn't see or hear anything. Eventually, we moved up on the road to my trailer. That night was a little weird as well. I like to go out on my porch and sit. There's something truly magical about the sounds of the crickets and night birds in chorus with the tree frogs and the katydids. It was a nice way to end each day, but that night there were no sounds. It was deathly quiet. There were no crickets, no birds or anything. Rather than being relaxing, it was a bit nerve-wracking. The next day, when Roscoe and I took our walk, we started down the trail into the woods again. This time there was a small tree branch leaned over the trail. It wasn't like it had broken and fallen. It was damaged. It was just leaned over to block the trail. I thought it was rather peculiar, and Roscoe was acting funny again. He was looking down the trail and acting like he didn't want to go into the forest. And I decided we'd take a different route for the next few days and check out the camp instead. That evening, I took my usual seat outside of my trailer. This time I heard some weird breaking noises in the forest behind me, but I didn't get up to investigate. The hair was standing up on the back of my neck, and I got this really creepy feeling that I couldn't shake. I left there a week later for better camping spots. While we were there, I never actually saw anything or even really heard anything other than some breaking sounds, but that was one that stayed with me and probably always will. Thank you for reading this. It was nice to share it with someone. I'm not sure if this is a man or a woman. I know there are men nurses, but namely there are women who are nurses, so I'm going to assume this is a woman. But man, thanks for sharing it. These are little things that happen to people in the woods, and they bother them forever. And I know how good it is just to tell the story. And so you're free to send your stories like this. This was a good one. She wrote it really well, and I was almost there with her. It was brief and to the point, but it's just a good letter. And thank you very much for sending it. And if I mistook you for a woman and you're a man, I'm really sorry, but I'm just taking a guess. So their name is spelled with initials, so I can't tell if it's a male or female name. Anyway, let's move on to another story. Thank you for sending it. This was good. This gentleman wants to be anonymous, and here's what he writes. This is pretty good. I'm a former active duty Marine Corps sergeant. Once a Marine, always a Marine. Just not in as good a shape as I was then. In the winter of 1997, I was only a Lance Corporal, or an E3, mountain training in Northern California. We'd been training for weeks, getting physically acclimated to the mountainous terrain, the higher altitude, and cold weather, but most of us were in good spirits. It was almost over. Our last training evolution was ambush training. We were to set up and wait for the other half of our class. We were to ambush them, and they were to defend our foe attack. We were set up in two-man groups, set 20 meters apart just inside a tree line opposite a little valley that acted like a choke point. We all dug in with interlocking fields of fire and distances mapped out. Man, we were ready. The hardest part of the exercise is always to hurry up and wait. It allows for too much speculation. When are they coming? Did they discover us and decide to flank us? Or are they just going to try and sneak past? The mind wanders when you know it's just training. And soon we took turns in our two-man fighting positions of 1 hour on and 1 hour off watches so we could get some rest, since we had been up for a long time at that point. This game took place from 2100 to 0300. That's 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. for any civilian timekeepers who might be wondering. At 0 hours, several of us heard a loud snap coming from about 100 yards in front of us across the ravine. It sounded like a tree had been quickly and efficiently snapped in two. I rustled my fellow Marines awake. The time to hurry up and wait was past, and we could get this evolution over. Soon we would be all warm and dry and sleeping comfortably. Let's get this done. With our M16A2 rifles fitted with BFAs, blank firing apertures, and mags loaded with blanks at the ready, we waited silently to lay fake waste to the fake enemy. We didn't have fancy night vision goggles and optics back then, so we were operating by the nicely lit star-filled sky. We heard another snap and made ready. Next we heard something crunching through the snowpack across the valley. We were getting itchy on the trigger to get this over with, as we had all waited and focused on the silence. We were trying to pinpoint where the sound had come from, but we still had no visual on the enemy. As we watched for signs of movement, a loud, deep, angry-sounding roar erupted from the far side of the little valley. It occurred to several of us that this might not be the enemy that we were expecting. It was like no other animal we'd ever heard. It had such a deep bass that we could literally feel the sound resonate through our bodies. It must have seen or smelled us. My fellow Marine and I looked at each other with "What the hell was that?" written all over our faces. Our radio came alive, telling us to regroup and pack it in. We were confused because we thought that we were finally going to get into the action, but we quickly and quietly moved out and back to the training class site. The next day we did a patrol and assessed the area. The opposite side of the little valley was steep and shaded out by trees, which is why we heard the noise, but couldn't see anything. We soon found huge footprints in the hard-packed snow. I'm 6'3" and I weigh 190 pounds. I could barely crunch down into the snow more than a couple of inches. These tracks were easily packed down 8 inches deep or more. I estimated them to be 16 to 18 inches long and 8 inches wide. As we stared at the prints, our normal banter stopped and we fell silent. We were stunned, not just by the size of the prints, but the distance between them. Whatever this thing was, it had a stride of 6 to 7 feet. The tracks led into the tree line where we could no longer see them. We asked the trainer if we could follow the trail, but tracking something not on the training schedule was not permitted, no matter how much we begged to do it. As the class wrapped up, some of the rowdier, less tactful Marines were already mouthing off about it being a Bigfoot. Well, that was my thought too. We were all told that we didn't see anything, nor did we hear what we thought we heard. That seemed odd, but I didn't question it. I just followed orders. However, as military guys will do, we all discussed it among ourselves and came to the consensus that we all heard and saw the tracks of a Bigfoot. Even though we didn't actually see it, the guttural roar and the tracks convinced us that's what it had to be. I was honestly never scared, nor were any of my fellow Marines. Mostly we were just curious and amazed. I'm guessing the overwhelming fear that people experience is from actually seeing it and not from distant noises. To this day, I fully believe that the source of those sounds and prints was the ever-elusive Sasquatch. I have also come to the conclusion that our training was stopped because our training staff heard it from their position. Maybe they knew something that we didn't. Maybe they were used to being around and knew better than to mess with it. Stay vigilant and Semper Fi. Oh man, that's a great story. He's in Northern California doing mountain training. My son was stationed in Southern California. Now, I think all he did was desert training. They did some mountain training in South Korea at one point, jungle training in, where was he? The Philippines, I think. And, but I don't think he ever went to Northern California. And I don't know if there's any Bigfoots in Southern California. But Northern California, yeah, there's all kind of reports of Bigfoot down there, and they're big ones. They're supposedly reported to be big ones. And why would they not creep in on a Marine unit out doing training in Northern California? Makes perfect sense. Too bad you guys weren't armed with live rounds in case that thing came at you. You could have been heroes. You could have had the first body of a Bigfoot. But to the anonymous writer, this was a great story. I love these military stories. They're awesome. I really appreciate you. Thank you. Another podcast in the can. I really appreciate you guys listening this far, and we'll see you on the next one. Thank you.